It's usually something completely out of left field that you don't expect to happen. That's your first big break that takes your revenue from, $1,000 a month to 20. And that's what happened to us. And I spend a lot of time talking about the importance of building resilience and durability into your life so that you can last as long as possible, so you have time to let one of those things happen.
Okay, guys, this is my second episode in this season where I sit down with an 8-figure dollar brand builder. Now, the interesting thing about these 8-figure dollar brand deals is that they're coming with some heat. I'm talking patented technology, but I do think that even if you're thinking, I don't have anything patented, Monique, why am I going to listen to this? Look, there are things that you can learn in terms of profitability, especially for today's episode guest. So let me just go ahead and get right into it. I'm joined by Adam Callinan, founder of Bottlekeeper and CEO now of Pentane. Adam built a multi-million-dollar business while keeping his overhead lean and protecting margins. He scaled in a super smart way. And after he sold Bottlekeeper, he took his learnings from growing that brand and created a model, which is Pentane, that he offers to early stage beauty brands to help you, founders. Yes, you. I'm here to help. I told you. He's helping founders to understand what levers they can pull to optimize profitability. Now, he's going to talk a little bit more specifically about that on the episode today, but we also get into some of the things like why the old DTC playbook from 2014 and 2018 no longer works and what you might be able to do instead of using that. We also talk a lot about profitability and what ways you can look at profitability to make sure that you are not just running a business that's a passion project, but you're running a business that is well positioned for acquisition and growth. I hope you all enjoyed today's episode. Let's go. As of the published date of this episode, I am an associate of Ulta Beauty. The ideas and thoughts represented here are my own and not that of my employer. So Adam, would love for you to just start off and tell us a little bit about yourself. I'm super excited to have you on the show today. You have a really cool story. What's your background? What's your story? You scaled your brand Bottlekeeper to 8 million without investors, without a full team. And I'm sure there's some help in there, but who was Adam before Bottlekeeper? And then would love to kind of get into, a little bit of that brand story.
Most things in life evolve and come from scar tissue. At least they do with me. So Bottlekeeper and the way that we built Bottlekeeper was on the basis of scar tissue from prior experience. And that prior experience was a medical device company that I went to out of college, went to University of Arizona, got a crazy science degree, which is why I'm good at math. We'll get to that later as we talk Pentane. The reality of that business is it was big and heavy, and I wasn't a founder of the device company. I was a partner in a medical tech piece that we spun off in 2008 and sold my position in that in 2013. And the challenge with that business, aside from the maniacal family components operating it that were not my family, that's a whole other story, is that it was big and heavy and it was hard to get away from. And, we spun off this tech piece and it was like 5 people in cubicles executing documents, and it got bigger in revenue than that medical device company in its first year of operations. It was like, oh, clearly there is a more efficient way to build business than whatever that was. So in exiting that position, Bottlekeeper was an idea that my cousin Matt had. So it was he and I that started the company. He was sitting on the beach drinking a beer out of a red Solo cup. It's like 80 degrees. He's kind of a maniac. He wants to drink a Corona out of a bottle at a specific temperature. And he sees people drinking water, whatever they're drinking out of water bottles, stainless water bottles, and has this idea to cut one in half and stuff it with wetsuit material, neoprene koozie material, and make a beer koozie, basically like a super duper beer koozie for his Corona bottle. So he classically scratched his own itch. That's how most startups happen. So he made that. He got me involved in it. I thought it was ridiculous and didn't think people would pay real money for it. So we did a whole bunch of testing, but I was really adamant because of that prior experience that once we came to agreement on doing this together, that we built the business in a way that did not require employees. So that was just like a guardrail at the beginning. It was at a point, this is 2013. So this is like Tim Ferriss 4-hour work week era, minimum viable product, lean startup, all of that stuff was like big then. I like solving puzzles. It was like, there's got to be a way to do this without hiring people. And at that point in technology, there was. 10 years earlier, it would have been significantly more difficult. But then it was, you had WordPress and WooCommerce and Shopify, and you could get all these things to talk to each other. And if they couldn't talk to each other, you could make them with Zapier or something like that. We started down that path and struggled with it for a long time. And then one day it took off.
So tell me a little bit about that in terms of the takeoff. So it sounds like 2013, you had this idea for Bottlekeeper. And then from there, you said, let's figure out how to scale this without employees. I find that to be very fascinating because I do think in some cases, employees can be expensive, but depending on who you hire, like if you hire the right people that you need, that can be the right thing. But you were still able to scale. So first, walk me back and take me through skill sets for you and your co-founder cousin. I'm assuming that you guys are complementary, but help me and the other folks that might be listening understand what balance of skills that the founder team had. And then I'd love for you to kind of take us through a little bit of like those steps to scale. Like, were you DTC? Then what happened next?
Matt and I are similar in education. We both got the same molecular and cellular biology degree from University of Arizona. We are completely different in personality in that I'm very comfortable with risk. I am completely okay with risk. I'm like I don't care if I lose it all. I know I will get it back. And now I have kids, so I think about that way differently. But then, I've always been comfortable with risk. Matt is very risk averse and conservative. And it was like perfect because you don't really want to be either of those things. And so, we would argue and fight like cousins do and often end up in the middle of a decision, which is the best place to be. That's the most balanced, appropriate place to be. So it worked really, really well for us. We decided really early on, probably by just the nature of skill sets. I was probably more tech and creative forward, and he was more financial and spreadsheet forward at the time. And we both grew together to get better at both of those things over the years. But we decided to split the company in half, and he would be responsible for all the things in the back end that a customer didn't see. So our manufacturing, our inventory, our financials, shipping and fulfilling, like the logistics, like all that stuff, which we did in-house we actually tried to take it out of house and we almost burned the company to the ground at the very beginning, but that's a different story. So we did all that stuff in-house at the beginning. So he did that. He was in Phoenix, I was in LA. That meant my responsibility was literally everything else, everything a consumer would see. So I built the website, I took the pictures, I shot the videos, I made the creatives, I did the emails, I did the customer service, I did the paid media, I built the campaigns, I did everything on the front end of the business. And there's something really hard about that, but there's also something really beautiful about it. Because I had that personal guardrail of no employees, it meant that I had to learn how to run every single one of those positions really, really well. And you can automate. We all have like email automation systems, right? Like this is early on. This is maybe pre-Klaviyo, but like MailChimp era. You can automate the heck out of those things. And as long as you're conscious of how you're communicating with your customer and doing it in an extremely personal way, they may realize that it's automated, but it won't feel automated. And that's something I was really conscious of. I wanted every touch point that a consumer had throughout their experience with our brand to be extremely personal. I wanted them to walk away from that experience going, holy cow, I can't believe that just happened. And you can do that with automation. Like you don't have to physically sit down and do all those things. So that's how we sort of divided and conquered. And it fumbled and struggled for, the better part of a year. And, we, in an super early stage business, there's always going to be an inflection point. There's some point at which something happens. Usually you don't expect it. It's not planned. It's not like you went to the trade show to meet with this one person and that one person said exactly what you wanted them to say. And that turned into this thing. Like, sure, that happens, but like, that's rare. It's usually something completely out of left field that you don't expect to happen. That's your first big break that takes your revenue from, $1,000 a month to 20. And that's what happened to us. And I spend a lot of time talking about the importance of building resilience and durability into your life so that you can last as long as possible. So you have time to let one of those things happen.
Yeah, I feel like for founders that durability is so important. It's almost like you have to be able to bounce back because there are going to be so many things that knock you down, so many things that it's like, we thought this was going to be the right way forward, but things changed. I mean, especially even considering like the current economic environment, things are changing rapidly fast. And if you're not able to respond to that, it becomes really hard for you to endure. Because in some cases, I feel like it's a matter of being the last person standing a little bit when you're a founder, like the person who can stay and stick with it the longest. There is money involved, though, with that. They can kind of keep things going. So what was it that happened? Were you able to pinpoint the point when you had that kind of accelerator? Because I have heard a lot of founders kind of talk about these moments where it was just like, and then it happened, like, and you know, a viral moment or whatever. Talk us through that.
Yeah. I mean, I remember the exact day. So our product was difficult to sell online with an image because the way that the product, I mean, I actually have our first prototype back there, but it's like, if you have a stainless steel water bottle, this is a huge one, so it's not this, like the bottom screws off of it and a beer bottle goes inside and you screw the bottom back on, but it just looks like a water bottle. I mean, the beer bottle sticks out of the top half an inch, you know, it took soda bottles or water bottles or whatever. Like the bottle sticks out. So our brains don't look at that and go, that's an innovative thing. You look at that and go, water bottle, cool, who cares? So it was impossible to sell in a still image through the entirety of the company, through the very end. So that inflection point happened in the summer of 2014, I think it was August, when Facebook launched their video ad platform. I went out on the beach, I propped up a camera, like a cheap camera on a backpack in the sand, and I put a Bottlekeeper next to a beer bottle in the sand, and I have like my hands come in, unscrew it, put the bottle in, screw it back in, and set it back in the sand. And I went to iMovie. Like I didn't know how to do these things. I was just making it up. I went to iMovie and overlaid, yep, that just happened. And we put that on Facebook and put $20 behind it or whatever, and it exploded. I mean, that was the inflection point. We finally were able to put dollars behind showing this product in action. And that single video, I mean, our revenue, just for context, went, I'm kind of making this up. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was a lot. It went from like 2,000 a month to 20 to 40 to 80,000 to selling out a product. And we rode that single video. I did not make iterations of that video for like 3 years. We used that single video to billions of views, like millions and millions. I mean, probably over $10 million in revenue. That one video. So, I mean, it was that's how we got like the highlight. Again, it's not talking about the lowlights and all the difficult stuff, which we should talk about because that's where all the goodies are. That highlight of we got to 8 million in 3 years with no employees. That's how that happened. We had just built the systems and infrastructure to be able to handle that load. And then we had that inflection point and we were able to just dump money. Like we reinvested every dollar that we made back into it. We didn't pay ourselves for 2 years and we had no employees. So we had no fixed expenses. So it was just printing money. We were just putting it back into advertising and inventory.
So when did you guys go on Shark Tank? So 2013 started the business, 2014, Facebook launches video, which like is kind of funny to say right now. Like this is just how quickly like technology is happening. Like video is everywhere now in 2025. So I like to timestamp things just because I'm sure I don't know how things are going to age or what folks will laugh at, 10 years from now. Totally. But when did you go on Shark Tank? And it sounds like, spoiler, you landed $1 million deal.
We went on Shark Tank when we were way too big to be on Shark Tank. And there's a process there. Like we went on, because we were hammering Facebook, mainly Facebook, which was actually a downside later on in the business. We could never figure out how to get off of Facebook and it got way more expensive. In 2015, a casting producer reached out to us. Like they saw an ad on Facebook and that happens. We weren't unique or special by any means. And so that started the process. And I was out of the country when they wanted us to tape. I didn't know this was going to happen, or obviously I would not have been out of the country, but that was the premise of the business. I wanted to build a business that we could operate. My wife and I could be anywhere in the world, like anywhere we had access to internet, we could be operating the business. So we were in Africa, we were in Asia, we were in Europe for like 6 months of the year. And it was awesome because we had never traveled before that because I was locked into a business I couldn't get away from.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was awesome. So I was in Iceland and they gave us the dates and I told them, okay, well, I'm in Iceland. I'll fly back for that date. And they're like, whoa, you're not in the country. No, we can't do that. I was like, why not? But in any event, they pushed us to the next season. The next season, they had too many beer companies on. So granted, in 2015, when they tried to get the first season, we did $1.8 million in revenue. So in 14, we did like 150,000. 15, excuse me, we did about 1.8 million. In 16, we did 8 million. So they pushed us to the next year. So we did these massive jumps, and that didn't work. They had too many beer companies on that season. And then they pushed us to the next year. So by the time we went on, which was 2018, we were an 8-figure business, and we were really lucky with how they taped. When they taped, these are the things that you don't control for. These are those outlier events that you don't get to plan around. Generally, they're timing related. Then you only get to look backwards and say, well, that was lucky, and it's all timing. We taped in June of 2018, a week before Father's Day, which was our second biggest day of the year. So we were able to open the episode. You get to make the episode whatever you want. And I mean that very seriously. There are some limitations. We wanted to get the sharks up out of their chairs and create a beach scene and make them take their shoes off and put their toes in the sand.
Cute.
And they liked the idea, but couldn't do it because it messed up their camera angles and lighting. And they gotta look pretty while they're doing it. So can't mess up the lighting. Totally get it. But we changed our intro a week before that to, one, include Alex Rodriguez throwing a ball, because we found out he was a guest judge. And we figured if he was going to be throwing a ball on national TV, there's no way they're not going to air our episode. So that was a strategy thing. We can talk strategy on that stuff if you want. But the other is we got to open the episode with, when you come in and say we want $1 million for 5%, they all do the thing where they're like, oh, that's crazy. You must have sales. Mr. Wonderful does that. I hope you have sales to back those numbers up. And it's we do. We've done over $1 million in the last week, and $10 million in the last 12 months.
Jaw-dropping line right there, right? They're like, oh, they're for real.
Yeah. And they all exploded. And Mark Cuban then immediately said, okay, you're either the worst business people in the world or you don't need to be here. And then went out before we were even talking.
He said, I'm out? He said, I'm out?
Oh, yeah. Totally.
Oh, my gosh.
We got him back in. But yeah, he's like, you guys clearly don't need to be here. You have no investors. You have, 3 employees or something. You don't need to be here. So I'm out. Yeah. It was funny. It was awful at the time, but it was funny. And we did get him back in. The deal we did was for $1 million for 5% with Mark and Lori. We did not do that deal in real life. There's a lot of reasons we can talk through. You go into due diligence after that
I've
for
heard.
forever. They don't, it's a TV show. Let's be clear. And it is real. You are.
Some folks do make a deal, and it is a matter of nailing down the numbers. But I think what I've heard is that post-show negotiations, how it actually maths out with actual numbers and penciling, it changes.
Yeah, they don't know anything about you. You don't know anything about them outside of what you see on TV, and you're going to take money from them, which means you have a fiduciary responsibility to those people. You want to know who they, what their interest is and what they want. Do they expect you to flip the company in 2 years? Because that's a problem if that's not what you want. And that's not what they wanted from us. That's just an example. And so, yes, after that, Lori just wanted us to be on QVC, and wasn't a fit for our brand. That just wasn't our brand.
Not the right consumer. QVC, no. I would think, is a lot more split to women. And it sounds like your core consumer is probably a little more of a man.
No, you're wrong.
No.
This is where you start a company and you put a product out, and then you have to let the consumer tell you who they are.
This is so true. This is important. You think I assume, but I'm assuming incorrectly. Tell us.
And we did the exact same. We thought it would be guys like us, 30-year-old guys, maybe not 18-year-olds, because it was an expensive product. They're not 18, they're not drinking. We made canned products and all these things later on that you could put anything in, but they were expensive. We wanted it to be expensive. It was a premium brand. We wanted to sell less product and make more revenue than sell more product and make, it was more of an efficiency thing for us. When we did that, we found quickly that our core buying audience was women from 30 to 65. By a lot, 70% of our core audience was women 30 to 65, because they were the gift givers in the house. They were the users of the product as well, but they were the gift givers in the house. And our product was very much a gift, summer vacation gift, Father's Day gift, Christmas gift kind of product. So that's who we advertised to. When we did influencer stuff, it was always with women. And it was great. It was that, you have to listen to the business. That's who our consumer was. So that's what we built it around.
So interesting. Okay, so you go on Shark Tank, you make a deal on the show, deal ends up falling through, which is totally fine because you guys clearly made it all right. Let's talk a little bit more about finances, because many early stage founders, especially I find in the beauty industry, they don't necessarily understand how to make a profitable business. Especially in beauty, there's passion behind it. There's typically an unmet consumer need behind it. And so the numbers kind of sometimes come after you've done your product formulation. Now, it sounds like you didn't necessarily have a formulator, but you did have innovative technology. I didn't ask, was there a patent behind it or anything that made it so that no one else could kind of copy it?
Yeah, the time we got acquired in 2021, we had 42 patents.
Wow. Okay, so can't touch this.
And people did touch it, and we had to spend a boatload of money defending it and building a bunch of strategy around being able to defend it on Amazon with court orders and a lot. So, I mean, I'm happy to talk about stuff. Unfortunately, I have deep domain expertise in patent issues.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So I'm going to pause there, but I'm going to stick with finances for right now. So you had some patented technology. So to a certain extent, no one was going to be able to come to market with the type of product that you brought to the market, but you still had these 2 employees, you and your cousin. What would you say as you grew? You had that $1.8 million year, then you had $8 million. Were there specific things that you look back on that when you look at your finances, you look at your P&L, you say, this is something that was super critical for us and that helped us to, be able to succeed? Was it the fact that it was patented? Was it the fact that you priced it in a premium way? I'd love to just hear your thoughts on that, just to give other founders insights as to what they could potentially consider as they're looking to build their businesses.
It's a really important question. To clarify, the protective nature of our patents didn't get protective until realistically probably 2018. Because I know that because in 2017, we spent over $500,000 dealing with patent infringement issues. And the basis of that investment took us we did in 2017 roughly the same revenue as 2016. It was about $8 million because literally all of our reinvestment money had to go back into patent issues. And so but that worked because then in 2018, we jumped to 13 million. So it didn't come protective till way later. And that's an important note. Like, we didn't have patent protection at the beginning, and that just paved the way for us. That is not how this happened. There are 2 things I think that we did really, really well at the beginning of the business. There were a boatload of things we did really bad. 2 things we did really well. One, which was not intended. One is the guardrail of not hiring people. I did that emotionally because I didn't want to manage a team. I didn't want the business to hold me down lock me in LA or in Manhattan Beach. I wanted to go and travel the world with my wife. That was a thing we missed. Neither of us had been out of North America. So we've been to Mexico and Canada. It doesn't really count. So that was the thing we wanted to do. The result of that is it kept our expense basis in the business extremely low. We had none. I was working off the dining room table. Matt was working out of his house or his office for a totally separate business. We had no expenses.
That makes a big deal. Yeah. Because a lot of times that overhead of paying yourself ends up being a huge expense. So if you can take that out, you can lean on a partner or lean on family. That makes a big difference.
Yeah. And to be fair, we could have paid ourselves much earlier than we did. We were just both fortunate. We didn't have kids. I didn't have a fancy life. We'd done reasonably well in the prior company. My cousin Matt had another business that he was making money from. So we just didn't really need to. So we were fortunate. We could have paid ourselves earlier, but the key was we weren't paying, and I say this with all the love and respect in the world, we weren't paying other people. We weren't solving problems with employees, which is what people tend to do. They tend to look at an issue inside of a business and immediately go to the solution to that issue, be hiring somebody in that has expertise in that problem. And I'm not suggesting or saying that you don't do that, but I do think it's really important you understand how the business has to adjust in order to pay for that. So you're not just doing it into a hole. So that's the one thing. We sort of unintentionally kept our fixed expenses extremely low. The second thing is that when you're the CEO of the business and you're also, for all intents and purposes, the CMO in the business and the CRO in the business and the chief everything in the customer acquisition part of the business, you have to look at things from the context of, and again, we didn't want to raise money from investors, so we had to be profitable. So it's looking at everything from the context of being the CEO, but also needing to understand the customer acquisition component. And I always had this challenge of trying to get data that made those things work together. Because we did have expenses. Like obviously we were buying inventory, we were paying for advertising, we were, later on we were paying an agency for email marketing help because that was a thing that I needed to not be doing every day. We had expenses, but we built a system in a spreadsheet really early on, probably in 2015. And because Matt and I were both really good at math, and he also got an MBA after our undergrads. So he had a really deep financial, like P&L, balance sheet, income statement, cash flow, projecting expertise that I didn't have. We were able to build this system that took in and recorded all of the expenses and how we were spending money in the business, and then combine that with how we were acquiring customers. And that created this clarity around what we could afford to spend in order to meet like our profit goals that we would set. What could we afford to acquire a customer for this product versus that product? And we ran that. It started small, and we ran the company on that from start to finish. It became this big, massive thing, but it was our source of truth in this behemoth of a spreadsheet with a bunch of complicated math in it that gave us the insight and clarity on how to operate the business, how to pull different levers inside the company to create that outcome.
That sounds so smart. I'm trying to think. It's more and more I'm hearing that these like finance and operations folks are actually critical partners for founders, because oftentimes I find, especially again in beauty and wellness, the founders are kind of like more creative, a little bit more traditionally innovative in terms of ideas and like big strategy, and we can do this. But then the person who's like, but does that pencil? Can we afford that? That's what's interesting. I'm curious to ask this, Adam, given how Facebook advertising costs have changed, and you kind of mentioned this a little bit, do you think you would have reached profitability in the same way, knowing how the costs are now? Or do you think you would have maybe had to have pivoted and done some things differently? Because a lot of what I'm hearing is there was definitely an investment on the DTC side. And it sounds like even from a retailer side, all of this is still DTC from 2013 through 2018. You didn't have a major retail partner?
Answering that, the last part of that first, I believed that if we were going to go into retail, it was going to require us to hire a person. So we said no to retail, and we had a reasonable amount of outreach. Again, we were spending a lot of money on Facebook. A lot of people were seeing the videos because CPMs were like, a penny back then. And so what we did was when people reached out, like we had a wholesale part of our website that basically just said, we have a wait list, leave your email, contact info. We'll let you know when we're ready to go to retail. Knowing that at some point it would make sense to do that, but we didn't know when that was going to be. So we did that in 2018. And the result of that is we had 3,000 stores on a wait list for 2018. And so we went from 0 to 5,000 domestic retail shelves in 1 year, in that first year.
Well, that's actually quite smart if you think about it. Kind of like if you want us, and because you had that patented technology, you also had the benefit of knowing no one else is going to come behind us. I think in beauty, one thing that's a little different is that if another brand isn't necessarily ready, I can probably find something that's still going to fill that space fairly quickly. So that's definitely a differentiator.
It's a different issue for sure.
But still,
it's a different problem. I mean, I looked at GoPro actually. Like Yeti for us was a big North Star for the way that they did branding and the way that they built this very high value product brand on things that a lot of other companies had, but you didn't want what the other companies had. You wanted what Yeti had, and you wanted to pay $300 for this cooler because it was Yeti. GoPro, when they went to retail, they waited until they had the demand to go to retail. And then when they did it, they were able to go to Best Buy and be very, very prescriptive on how it was sold and where it was sold and how it was positioned. And I always thought that would be a smart way to do it. And we were really lucky. Again, in hindsight, we made some good decisions early on about how those things were collected, that by the time we went to retail, that is how it worked. We got to, in very nice ways, kind of define what was okay and not okay. Like, not a single retailer of those 5,000 was allowed to sell our products online. It didn't make sense to me to expand our revenue model into a physical presence to compete with ourselves for Google ad clicks. at a lower margin, right? Because they're buying it at a much lower margin than we were selling it to the consumer.
Negotiate that in 2018 and 2019, saying we only want to sell you in physical brick and mortar retail, not online.
You're not allowed to sell online.
Wow. And give me an idea of what kind of retailers were you at? So you're at Nordstrom.
Ace Hardware, Nordstrom's, the Container Store, Sur La Table. I mean, like good. And there was a lot of mom and pops in there as well. But I mean, we were at I wanted it to be like when you see this thing on the shelf at this place, it elevates our brand. So we, all the love to the vape shops and tobacco shops and like mini marts and things out there. But like that wasn't for us. We got a lot of outreach for them and it just didn't fit our brand. So we politely declined. So we worked with a lot of really amazing brands.
Sounds like you were very strategic about that and thoughtful in saying, we know what's important to our brand. We've built up enough demand where we can now ask this. I don't know if those levers are necessarily there for every brand that's going to a retailer, but I think the important part, or one of the takeaways that you can have from this, is that things that you don't always think are negotiable could be. I mean, who would have thought that you could say, hey, we have strong enough DTC presence that we don't actually want you to sell us online. But we have Adam here sharing that, hey, that was how he approached it. And the retailers respected that because to a certain extent, they likely understood that. And I'm sure in some ways, I'm not sure if you were on Amazon as well, Adam, when you were selling, or were you? So
we grew to be on Amazon, but that was a patent infringement issue. We didn't want to be on Amazon at all because Amazon, we wanted the customer. I wanted the relationship with the customer. I wanted to show the customer that, holy cow, I can't believe that just happened experience. And you can't do that on Amazon. It's Amazon's customer. It's effectively like a B2B channel. So we did end up going on it, but that's because patent infringing product showed up there. And the only way we could defend it was by being there. And that was a whole process. But so we did sell on Amazon, much to our chagrin.
So sticking with this is, such a fascinating story. I'm like, there's so many nuances. So you talked a little bit about that back in Profitability and the spreadsheet that you all created, or this model, let's say, where you're looking at what are our costs to acquire the customer? What are all of the other costs, let's say, to produce? You created a wait list so that you had this huge demand so that when you were ready to go to retail, it was almost like you just accelerated growth. At that point, I know I'd read in the notes that you have a note that you increased 20 million per year brands profit by 52% or something along those lines. But was that the point when you went to retail? And I'm wondering, is that because of COGS and scale? You kind of went from DTC distribution to thousands of points of distribution. And I'm assuming that would impact your COGS in a really amazing way.
Yeah, those are separate things. The what you're referring to is a case study from Pentane, which is years later. That's now.
Okay.
It is all, Pentane is built on that software, that like system that we created at Bottlekeeper. It's now just way better. But your question is really important. And I was going to want to come back to this anyways. You asked, this is related to that question. You asked if I would basically, if I was going to start a consumer brand today, would I go and do the same thing? And the answer to that is absolutely not. I would do the opposite, frankly. We went into retail because we knew it was time, because we saw how much more expensive it was getting to acquire customers online. And we knew that was never going to get better. It was a slippery slope that we were sliding down. So it was time in 2018 to open that additional revenue channel that had, we were selling to those partners at largely a 50% margin. So some, 45 to 55, like in that range, 50% margin. So our margins were good. It was time to open up that additional revenue channel that didn't have an ad spend component attached to it. And that like aha inflection point when we decided to do that was I had a sales rep out of nowhere, somehow got my cell phone number, called me and said, I have the head of Ace Hardware who wants to put this in 2,500 stores. Are you interested? I was like, okay, it's time. Like, we got the call. Now it's time to go and do the thing that we've tried to not do. We had a small team at that point, so we had the support to be able to handle it. So it made sense. But I do think that building a consumer brand today entirely on paid media is extremely difficult. And even if you can do it, is just dangerous because it's never going to get better. It's always going to be get more difficult year after year after year. So I think going omnichannel across, retail and being really conscious of how you're acquiring customers is absolutely critical.
This is one of those pieces that is changing, I would say, so rapidly when it comes to this like emerging brand space, because many of the brands that at this point have scaled, let's say you're 10 years in the game, like you started in 2013, you were still like pre-iOS changes. You were still, pre all these other costs that made it just changed the game, like changed the way of doing business. And so now I do find that like many brands, the story for the brands that I feel like were started, let's say post-pandemic or during the pandemic, I'm still waiting to see what those brand scale stories are, specifically from those that are not influencer or like celebrity backed, because there is typically a different kind of numbers, or finances supporting those types of businesses.
Yeah.
So talk to us a little bit more about Pentane, because that sounds like something that could be really helpful, especially since it has some of that knowledge of the back-end system that you created to help with profitability.
So Bottlekeeper got acquired we closed in March of 2021. I was on through the end of the year, which was part of the deal. Matt and I were ready to move on. So we didn't want to do like the private equity thing where you get dragged along for forever. So that was the deal. We were out at the end of the year, which was awesome. And I took advice from a wise sage who told me to do nothing, and not just go start another company immediately, which is of course what I tried to do against his wishes. Learned the hard way, finally sat still. And I got bored one day, realized the hardest decision I had all day was what to have for breakfast. So he said, great, let's go start something. Go consult. So I found 2 companies that I had invested in. Katie, my wife, and I had invested in. And I went to them and I said, can I help? And they said, sure. You want to look at stuff? Absolutely. Go nuts. One was a $2 million a year business. One was that $20 million business that you're referring to. And that $20 million a year was profitable. Like they were not, it was not a bad business. It was profitable. The operator is that creative guy, super intelligent. I mean, he was an incredible operator. They didn't understand the nuance that exists between that operational finance piece and the customer acquisition piece. They didn't understand that. So they didn't understand how to pull levers to change their profitability outcome. I say this sort of tongue in cheek, and I don't do it to be derogatory or demeaning, but they kind of like didn't know how to make money.
I think it's a lot more common than people realize. Yeah.
And the answer, like profitability, there's a lot of thing in business that's like part art, part science. A lot, right? Profitability is math. I'm serious. Like it is a math problem.
That's a drop mic statement right there. Like profitability is math, period.
Yeah, it just is. The challenge is that we talk about like a business has a CFO, a bigger company, a 10 or something $1 million a year business, like has a CFO and they have a CMO. The problem is that the CMO and the CMO is creative and the CFO is financial. They don't speak the same language. The CMO is telling the CFO that they need more budget. The CFO is telling the CMO, you can't have it because it's at risk and I don't know what's going to need to do. So just do your job better. And the result of which is that you have this impasse of really critical data. And that exists in a $200,000 a year business, and that exists in a $20 million business. It's the same problem. You may not have the same people involved, but that creative founder, which is how most companies get started, they're creative. They solve a problem. They create a thing. They create the visual. They create the idea. They create the concept. If they don't have like deep financial expertise, they're missing this part of the business. So all I did was I rebuilt systems that we had used at Bottlekeeper, and I put it inside these companies, and it completely changed them. Because it gave them the tools to better understand how they could acquire customers. And it's in some cases, spend more money, a lot more money to acquire customers, but do it in a way that was extremely profitable. So in that case, that $20 million a year business that increased their net profit by over 50%, they had a fixed expense basis of $7 million a year. And they were leaving this customer group. It was an online ticketing festival venue. They were underselling the festival. They had like 1,000 extra tickets per day in a festival that they weren't selling. The value of those tickets was $300 with, the ticket plus food and bev and merch and all the things that the people would spend when they came in the door. And so they were just not selling them. They could increase their ad budget. They could literally spend $250 to acquire that $300 customer, which from a ROAS standpoint is disgusting. But that $50 was pure net profit because their fixed expenses were already paid for. Like the fixed expenses were going to happen whether they sold them or not. So that was pure margin. They were just leaving. So they spent a lot more on and those numbers I'm kind of making up. I don't remember exactly what they were. So someone that does the math and says, 50 divided by 300 is not a 50% margin increase. The reality is they added $1 million in net profit to their business. It was like $800,000 in net profit to their business by just knowing what that gap was. And not every business is the same. That was not a, that wasn't a Bottlekeeper company. That wasn't a beauty brand, but it's all the same math and they're all the same problems.
I like that profitability is math because to a certain extent, you got to do the math and you got to look at all the different variables, right? And you're talking to someone who, even though I work in beauty now, I study chemical engineering in undergrad. So I get the number side of it when we say like, hey, look at the variables, look at the things that you can change over here and see if it's worth it, to your point. Oh, these are the fixed expenses. They're going to be what they are. Well, then what can we do if we want to acquire more customers? As you think about, it sounds like you have Pentane now, but if you think about folks who might be navigating specifically a consumer brand, like again, thinking in the beauty space, what shifts in mindset or operation do you think are critical for founders today to consider as they're looking to scale? You talked a little bit about omnichannel, but would love for you to just touch a little bit more on that. Like, what are some of those key factors that you think are important for founders that are in the thick of it today?
10 years ago, not even 10 years ago, 5 years ago, you could raise money from, I'm being flippant here, but I'm going to do it anyways. You could raise money like for anybody for any reason at any valuation. That doesn't happen anymore. That's not the way today works. VCs today, even if they have like the dry powder to deploy, they want you to build a profitable business. And the reality of being profitable as the operator or operators of that business, what that provides you from a flexibility and stress relief and lifestyle standpoint are phenomenal. It could make it so you don't have to go raise money from the investor. You don't have to build another pitch deck. You don't have to work every single weekend because you're trying to grind through it. And so people are now focusing a lot more on profitability, which I think is incredible. Again, I'll go back to the challenge is that you have to be able to connect that operational finance piece with the customer acquisition piece. And that is like the mission critical part of it. Once you have that, which is what Pentane does, I mean, we can talk about that if you want. Once you have that, then you can take the information that exists there on how the engine inside your business operates and how much fuel it needs and how efficient it needs to be. And then you can make much, much better, smarter decisions around whether it makes more sense to focus your efforts on retail because the margins might be better, whether it makes sense. I mean, like you can see the data that says you're actually making more money from this thing that you didn't realize than this thing. If you want that to change, go pull this lever over here, slide this slider and see what you need to do differently with respect to your ad spend with the needed ROAS to meet your net profit goals, with your expenses, with your conversion rates, with your AOVs, like all that stuff, to change that outcome, knowing that direct to consumer part of your business generally feeds the consumption on the B2B side of your business. They have to work together. They work in conjunction.
I know with many financial models too, they're only as good as the inputs or the things that you put in. So if a founder, let's say, is like, I'm not really good at tracking my spending or what I do on this or what I do on that, does that make it harder to, to kind of figure out the story? Is like step 0, like understand your baseline and start tracking and then you kind of move forward into, understanding profitability?
Yeah, there are two sides to that. You are absolutely right. I mean, for me to say that math is, profitability is a math problem is absolutely true. But it is completely a garbage in, garbage out situation. If the data inputs are not accurate, the data outputs will not. They can't be accurate. It's impossible. But most, if you're $1 million+ a year business, you generally speaking have a QuickBooks Online account. It's connected to your bank. Maybe you have an inexpensive bookkeeper that goes in there once a month and reconciles your accounts. You don't need to be on an accrual accounting method. Like that's a whole other thing. If you are, great. You should eventually get to that because it's a smarter way to operate a CPG brand. But if you're on a cash basis, like the system accounts for that, you just need to have a base level of a P&L that you're not living out of. Like that's accurate to the business. You're not paying your house rent or your car payments. Like these are all normal things that early stage companies do. Like we did it. I get it. So it needs to be accurate, but it can also be projected. I mean, we have companies that come into Pentane that are like pre-revenue, that this is our projected P&L. They literally have 3 lines on it. It says fixed expenses, cost of goods with plus shipping, and marketing expenses. And that's like the extent of it. And that's okay. Anything is better than nothing. So if the closer we can get to accurate, the more accurate the data is. But doing nothing and making decisions blind, which is effectively relying on hope as a strategy, which we all know is not a great strategy, anything is better than that.
So as we talk about that kind of like relying on hope or making mistakes, I would love for you to share. You said you made many mistakes, had some luck and some success, clearly. But what is 1 or 2 mistakes, that you made early on that you typically share if you talk to a founder, or that you're like, if we had not done that, that would have saved us $1 million, or would have saved us 2 weeks worth of like mental capacity? Yeah. What are those things?
There are 2 that stand out. I mean, there are a lot. Some of them get into like the nuance of attribution, which we don't need to spend time on because that's like an entirely different podcast. The first like massive, just idiot move. We made our first product was stainless. It was 1 color, 1 size. It was like the Henry Ford Model T. And we figured that we'd bring that in and we'd try to sell it. And if we started to sell it, our customers would tell us if they wanted other colors, if they wanted other sizes. So it wasn't just us making it up. And they did that. They said, we want red and we want blue. And so we made red and blue when we brought it in. And because this is like our second manufacturing run, we had no idea what we were doing. We didn't QC or quality control the product in the manufacturing. So we didn't do it until we received the product because we were back ordered for like 5 months. So we had to have the product. And when we did QC the product here, we sent it to a lab to have the paint tested to make sure that it was like lead paint, no issues, like all that stuff that you do because that's bad. And it came back over the legal limit for lead paint. So we had 3,000 units of red and blue that were already sold.
Oh no. Sold like out the door in the consumer's hands, or sold like pre-ordered?
We pre-ordered, correct.
Okay.
They had already been paid for. No, that would have been a whole other problem.
Right. I was like, ooh,
I am not admitting to distributing a lead paint product 10 years later. No, we still had it. So we spent the next like 2 weeks, Matt in Phoenix and me in Manhattan Beach. I have pictures of this. It's pretty funny. We went to Home Depot and bought industrial paint stripper, and literally like rubber gloves to the elbow, lab goggles. We literally paint stripped with industrial paint stripper 3,000 units of paint off of Bottlekeepers to make them sellable. And this stuff was so strong, it would burn through their gloves. I mean, I ended up using gardening gloves. It burned through the gloves in like 1 minute. So we were out there with spray bottles, spraying these things, melting the paint off of these things. And my cousin had made a drill bit that we could put a sand grinder on to grind the stuff off, but it made a product that we could then tell the customer, look, the order got screwed up. We don't have red and blue, but we're going to send you 2 stainless ones in the place. So that saved the company. Here's the kicker though. We had them test. We wanted to trust but verify, which is a good thing to do. So we went and we figured out that there was a certification process that labs need to go through. So we went and found a certified lab and sent them products, and they were totally fine. So we did all of that for nothing because we didn't double check.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Because I was going to say, for those that are just listening and not watching, when Adam said we sent it to a lab, you kind of heard the, I'm going to call it skepticism in his voice, but he also used air quotes. Yeah, so that first lab that he was talking about, that's why the air quotes are there, because they were wrong. Oh, that's so unfortunate.
Yeah. It's part of the story.
I mean, did you give them like a really bad Google review or something like that? I mean, what can you do when that happens?
At that point, you just like laugh and move on. I don't know. I mean, this is super early. This is like 2014. So.
So Google reviews don't have the same weight as they did before.
Not. The second one, which is much quicker, is I violated my own principle in 2018 on the back of that Shark Tank airing. Like, we had a huge jump in sales. We could directly attribute about $1 million in revenue in the first week after that episode aired, which was in December of 2018. It was season 10, episode 5 or 6. And so I violated all of my own principles and what that spreadsheet system was telling me. And I went and hired a couple of people. I went and opened an awesome office in El Segundo, like had this epic outdoor deck, like way more than we needed. We went from like a WeWork space to this insane $15,000 a month office. Like, I went off the deep end and started spending money that there was no reason to be spending. the result of which is in 2019, like we made in 2018, we did about 13 million in revenue. We made about 1.8 or $2 million in net profit. In 2019, we lost 1.8 or $2 million in net profit because I violated my core tenets of the business and didn't listen to the own systems that I had built. So, I mean, then you get to do the hard things. You get to, fire people and lay people off that you really like, that you really enjoy being around and you care for. You get to go and renegotiate trying to buy yourself out of an expensive office. And that totally changed, turned the company around. We got back on the right track. A couple of years later, we got acquired and it was awesome. But, you got to listen to the data. But we're all emotional humans and I'm as susceptible to it as anybody is.
Yeah, I've heard that kind of statement of like, don't do things because you feel like you want to. It's like we want to support people, but you got to make sure that it's a smart business decision. Because if it's not a smart business decision, when the business maybe isn't doing so well, you're going to have to do something with the person. Like you're going to have to let go of the person. So that's where it's important. Like if you're making a decision, like thinking long-term, is this a long-term sustainable decision for the business? If it's not a long-term decision, then maybe that's where you look at hiring someone as a contractor or making a decision on a more shorter term basis. But that was a tough lesson. Oh man. Oh, yeah. Well, look, I feel like I learned so much about your story, about Bottlekeeper, about Pentane. We'll definitely include some information for listeners so that they can find more information about it, because that sounds like it could be extremely, extremely helpful for folks that are listening. But love to just always close by asking folks, if you had one piece of advice that you would give to an early stage brand founder, what would it be? It can be related to the stuff that we've been talking about, or it can be totally different just based on what, your experience as a founder, and entrepreneur.
One of the things that I learned really early on is that just because somebody says something doesn't mean it's true. And I'm not talking about the lab testing experience. I'm talking about the how you build your business experience. If you think about it, once you get into owning a business, you will get asked a lot, like, did you get an MBA? Like, how do you know what you're doing? And the reality is like, no, we're making it up as we go. You get to script your own story and build that thing however you want to build it. Now you have to listen to the feedback that you get, and that needs to come in the form of data. So it's non-emotional. And that may direct the thing in a slightly different way than you thought. For us, we ended up selling to women, which was awesome. We didn't know that was a thing. We went in all sorts of different directions that we never thought we were going to do. But that's the direction that the business needed to go. But again, in the big scheme, you get to build it however you want to build it. There is no playbook. You hear other people's stories. Your story isn't going to match their story. You're never going to follow someone else's path. You have to create your own. And there is so much beauty in that freedom and flexibility. Once you get to the point where you just recognize that you're just making it up, and that's good. That's okay. That's a good thing. That's how it's supposed to work.
Every story is unique. Well, look, Adam, thank you so much for coming on the show today. This was so helpful. And would love for you to just shout out if you have any information about Pentane, or if folks want to follow you, feel free to share that now.
Yeah, you can find us at pentane.com. The product is super easy, onboards in 10 minutes. It's really inexpensive because I want to help as many early stage brands as we possibly can. You can find me on LinkedIn. I don't generally use the other socials, but I am spending some time there screaming, yelling about business stuff.
I love that. Thank you so much, Adam. This was great. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Monique. Really enjoyed it.
Wraps up today's episode of Scaling Emerging Beauty. A huge, huge thank you to Adam for coming on the show and just pulling back the curtain on what it takes to be profitable and scalable. What I loved about today's show is that Adam not only shared his wins, but he also shared some of his mistakes and was very honest about that. So it was great to hear both sides of the story. It was really impressive still how he grew Bottlekeeper to be cash flow positive and kept that retailer wait list. That was just genius. If you found this episode helpful, I want to encourage you to leave a comment on Spotify or Apple Podcasts so that more people can find it. It helps the podcast. And also, if there's anything that you learned from today, I'd love to hear from you. Send me a DM on Instagram at Scaling Emerging Beauty, or go ahead and drop a comment wherever you are listening so that we can chat about it. As always, I appreciate you being here, and I'll catch you on the next episode. Bye.